let's talk about these rumors that I'm sure everyone's heard of at this point. The Canon EOS R5, 8K, 30 frames a second. Should we believe it? Apparently, everything points to that this is true. These are in fact real specs, according to Canon rumors and other people on the internet. A lot of buzz about the upcoming R5. Thankfully, we don't have to wait too long to find out if all this stuff is actually true, because supposedly it's going to be announced in a few weeks and then released later this year. So I thought I'd put together just a little video on my thoughts on what all these specs even mean, how they'd even be used, what the value would be, where this kind of fits in the marketplace, in the industry, now that we're in 2020. And we got a lot of great cameras on the market. There's tons of options. Pretty much any camera you shoot with nowadays is going to do a really good job in terms of taking good photos, taking good video, really whatever you need. So it does kind of come down to the individual specs, the things on paper that matter to you. And I don't know, that's why this stuff I think makes, headlines, because people care about resolution. They care about 8K video. They think it's impressive. They think it's cool, especially coming from Canon. Hopefully this live stream is working. I was thinking just recording a video and uploading it, but basically the video I was going to record and upload was going to be essentially this, just me talking, so I figured I might as well just do it live. And yeah, this is not the majority of the content that I have planned coming up. This is just kind of an impromptu stream based on the news. I do have some other videos coming up. I'm trying to get the channel back up and running, but it takes time. I have a full-time job. I work doing video production every day, basically. And so the YouTube stuff is in my spare time, so it does take a little bit longer to upload stuff, but I'm trying to put some new content up. I've got some other stuff shot that I just need to edit, so that stuff is coming. But let's talk about these specs, because it's exciting with a big, big grain of salt. I titled this Expectations versus Reality, because obviously when you read a list of specs, those expectations are kind of set internally by the person reading the list. You interpret it however you want, versus the reality of when this thing actually comes out. It might not align with your personal take on what these mean. Even though you would think a spec sheet, there's no room for interpretation, there always is room for interpretation. So let's run down the list of the rumored R5 specs. It'll be called the R5. 45 megapixel sensor, in-body image stabilization, so starting right here, this is kind of a no-brainer. Like, obviously a camera like this should have it. Most other cameras on the market in this class do. So it's getting to that point where a camera that doesn't have any kind of built-in stabilization looks weird and out of place. So if it didn't have in-body image stabilization, that would be a huge kind of red flag of like, what are they thinking? What are they doing? So I believe that one. I'll take it. Makes sense. It obviously should. I think it would be a huge thing against Canon if they didn't incorporate it into a camera like this. For photography, we got 12 frames per second mechanical, 20 frames per second electronic. Okay, great. Most people aren't really talking about this camera from a photography standpoint, though, so we're going to go past that one. Dual card slots. Huge benefit for some people. Other people don't really care. I shoot with the GH5 often, shoot with the Ursa Mini often. Ursa Mini technically has 4 card slots. GH5 has 2 card slots. I almost am always using 1 card just for, honestly, just organization, keeping things straight. I would hate to record to 1 card and pull the wrong one, or, whatever the situation might be where you just get confused with whatever the cards are. If you are only needing 1 card, it's kind of certain situations call for 2 cards where you need extended card capacity and you're out in the field and you can't change a card, or you need to run over, like if you're shooting video and it's going to fill 1 card and run to the next. But I'd say a majority of the time doing the work that I do, and it's pretty frequent, it's pretty regular, I don't need the dual card slots. But I know some people love it. They want to shoot RAW to one, they want to shoot JPEG to the other, or they want to shoot photo to one, video to the other. That's all great, but I just think whenever you have 2 card slots, it gets kind of confusing. It's like, what's recording where? And especially if you're working with a team of people, you don't want to have to explain like, card slot 1 is this and card slot 2 is that, and then you pull the wrong card and people just get confused. It's easier if it's just like, here's the card, shoot on that card, give me the card back, and we're good. No scroll wheel added to the back. More traditional Canon style, no touch bar. Okay, people really like that stuff, but that's basically like making it how other Canon cameras are. So that's not anything special. Live view movie toggle like previous DSLRs. Yes, also very kind of standard traditional feature functionality there, so nothing too exciting. Larger capacity battery, but looks like an LPE6. I would assume at this point in time, Canon has to give some better battery capacity if it's going to be like an LPE6. Like those LPE6s with just current power consumption in most cameras that they get used in, even in like the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera 4K, that takes LPE6s and it chews through those batteries. So if you're going to be adding these features that we're going to get to, like the 8K 30 frames a second, you're going to need a heftier battery. So that makes sense. But this is really where it gets to the exciting headline news. And this is the 8K 30 frames a second, 4K 120, and 4K 60. Now, let's talk about this. Like, why break it out this way? It seems odd to say 8K 30, 4K 120, 4K 60. Why break it out that way? Why designate 4K 120 and 4K 60 unless there's a difference between the two? And that's where I think you kind of have to start reading between the lines and thinking, okay, well, what would differentiate these two? Is 4K 120 some kind of burst mode? Is it cropped and 4K 60 isn't? Are they both cropped in some way and one's a more severe crop? Because we know how much Canon likes their crop factor on these full frame cameras, but they don't want to give you full frame video. No. They want to give you crop video. 8K at 30 frames a second, is that burst? Is that like a photo mode? A lot of times these headlines are purely for marketing. Canon, they're kind of the masters of marketing in terms of putting information out there that reads like a really nice high-end spec, especially in a rumor list like this. And when it actually comes to practical usage, you realize, oh, there's a severe crop, or oh, the codec is incredibly like the files, either the codec's inefficient or the files are just really large. You've got it in burst mode. Like what are the limitations? Because that's all these need like a big asterisk, I think, because I don't think there's any way that Canon puts an 8K video camera out on the market this year in a mirrorless hybrid style camera. Like I don't think that's even close to being possible. Yet you look at this little blurb and people lose their minds over a rumor list that's supposedly confirmed, and yet take it with a huge Canon sized grain of salt, because it's always like Canon likes, they love the salt. They like the saltier the better. It seems to be the way Canon makes their cameras. And what's funny about all this stuff, let's finish the list. Built-in Wi-Fi, fine. The new battery, we already talked about that, and launching in July, an announcement around February 13th, just in time for Valentine's Day, so you can fall in love with Canon all over again. So I think each of these features, the 4K 60 maybe, like, okay, but that's catching up with basically everyone else right now in the mirrorless game in terms of feature-wise. Like GH5 has had it. Sony, it's assumed to be coming very soon, and the next A7S camera. You've got Blackmagic 4K 60 has been a staple for a while. So 4K 120, 8K 30, I think these are going to be severely handicapped modes. There's no way that it's going to be full frame 8K 30 frames a second or 4K 120 full frame, like in any kind of traditional video sense where you can actually record more than like a little blip. But here's the thing. This is what ends up happening anytime this stuff comes out, is people will say like, oh, it's Canon, it's amazing, and you don't need clips longer than a few seconds anyway. If you're editing in your timeline, you can get by with only a few seconds. Like, you're not going to use video that's longer than a few seconds. So like, use the 8K mode or use the 4K mode. Like, it's no big deal. It's no problem. When there's any of those limitations, they're always excused away for whatever reason. Like, oh, there's no flip screen. You don't need a flip screen. And then they come out with a camera that has a flip screen. It's like, yay, the flip screen. So it really is kind of that, I hate to use the word, but like that fanboy mentality of just excusing away the things that like are actually like not that great or are just kind of like marketing hype versus the actual practical real life stuff. And that's one thing that's constantly like criticized against other cameras. You have like your Sony or your Panasonic cameras with like the Lumix GH5, and there are so many features in the freaking GH5, and that's why I love it personally, just because there's so much you can do. And what do people always say? It's like, oh, well, it's not full frame, or like the autofocus sucks. And but yet they'll excuse away all the other stuff, like on the Canon EOS the R. It's only 4K 30. Well, you don't need anything. You don't need slow mo 4K. You don't even need 4K. You only need like 1080. And then they get excited over 8K 30 frames a second. So it's like, I think everyone just needs to appreciate and realize how powerful the cameras are that we have. Like if we get 8K 30 frames a second in a Canon, awesome, excellent, great job, Canon. Thank you for pushing things forward. I don't believe it's going to happen in the way that it's listed here on this piece of paper or this website, but if it does happen, it's going to push Sony, it's going to push Panasonic, it's going to push Nikon, and that's the whole name of the game. And the only reason I think people are even like looking at this as a realistic list is because people know how far behind Canon is in terms of like a video, and people who are on YouTube shooting video content, doing video production, making short films, shooting music videos, whatever it is. Canon was like the main thing with the 5D Mark II, even the 5D Mark III, and they gave all that away to their cinema EOS line, and their DSLR mirrorless stuff has been just so far behind in terms of any kind of video features. And they lost that whole all the goodwill they had built with people. They lost to Sony, they lost to Panasonic, even Nikon. Now people are like talking about Nikon for some reason, like and you have other players, Blackmagic, you have the Zcam stuff now. There's like so many more options, and I think everyone kind of knows that in the back of their mind. Even the people who are hardcore Canon fans know how crippled their hybrid cameras, DSLR cameras have been when it comes to video. And so when they look at this, they get excited again. They go, oh yes, finally Canon coming back to the Canon, we all knew. And for me personally, the Canon cameras have been great. They've been fine. But when you look at Amazon and you're looking at spec sheets on B&H or wherever, I'm going to go with the camera that gives me the features that are practical and like that are useful. And that's why I went with the GH5 compared to the Sony or any other camera at the time. It's because like there was no recording limit. You could adapt pretty much any lens to Micro Four Third. You can use a speed booster if you want it to be more Super 35 APS-C. You can actually do anamorphic on the GH5. You can do 120 slow-mo, 180 slow-mo, even slightly, crippled resolution-wise, 4K 60, stabilization. Like it does have autofocus, maybe it's not the best autofocus, but it's got like all the features there. The flip-out screen, like a good, decent battery, like everything about it makes it so useful. Where a lot of the Canon stuff is like, maybe it looks nice, or when you actually end up doing it, it's like, okay, you got all these kind of like limitations, especially when it comes to video. And for whatever reason, video has become a lot more of kind of like the main selling point, I think. I know there's people who just do photography, and there are certain things that are important to them, like Sony on the A9. It was the kind of the blackout free mode where you could just shoot and it would the viewfinder wouldn't black out. Like that stuff's important to people, and I get it. But people are talking about the R5 because of the video features, and they know how far Canon has to come to get back into that game and win people back over. And all it takes is Sony saying, oh, hey, here's the A7S III, check it out. And people are probably at this point going to opt for that because they have the Sony lenses, they like the Sony system. Or Panasonic does something great with the Lumix S1H successor, or the GH6 or whatever they have coming next, because they're such a hardcore community around the GH cameras and the Lumix stuff. They need some help with their lens selection, but like the main point is that all these cameras are really, really good, and it would be pretty incredible if Canon could do 8K at 30 frames a second, and they did it in a mirrorless body. But even if they did, what would it cost? there's no way they're going to do that for what the current Canon EOS R costs. It's like is it like $1,000 or $2,000? Yeah, like they have it's incredibly cheap, right? These the R cameras, less than 2,000 for the R, and then the RP is a little cheaper. So when you look at these specs, this R5, if all of this is exactly what you think it is the perfect, sweetest, most beautiful camera you've ever seen. It does all these amazing video features. What's it going to cost? And then what is the codec going to be? What is the file size going to be? Because if this is some kind of like burst raw mode where it's not even like encoding, it's just capturing the data, are those files going to be incredibly massive? And how are you going to handle that? So there's so many like little asterisks that go with all these specs. It's really kind of like, okay, be excited for something coming that maybe Canon is actually doing something interesting and innovative again in the video space for mirrorless cameras. The cinema stuff is great, but it's just really expensive and probably overpriced. But hey, different people like different things. And I think that's the thing. I keep saying it at the end of the day, is like basically any camera from the past, even like almost 5 years, I'd say, ever since the GH4 came out, basically in like the A7S, everything since then in the video space, there's no excuse for not capturing great content because we have the tools. You can do anything with any camera and it's going to look pretty good. If it doesn't look good, that's probably user error, not camera error. And while I would look to cameras to give you features that maybe you can't achieve on your own, in terms of autofocus, if you're using a gimbal or something like that, and you need that feature, and you want the eye tracking or whatever it is, or you need the little bit extra dynamic range, or you need the stabilization, or you need the higher frame rate because you want to shoot slow mo. Those are actual practical features, but 8K in a YouTube world where most people are still saying that 1080 is perfectly fine, like that, I've seen like a series of videos lately from YouTube creators where like 1080p is fine, you don't even need 4K. I still prefer to shoot in 4K just because of reframing and post-production and the flexibility it gives you there. But there's people who say you don't even need 1080, you don't even need 4K, you only need 1080p. So what good is 8K going to do for those type of people, and how much are they going to be willing to pay for it? If anything, it's probably just a gimmick on the list of just some cool thing to put on the box, get people excited, and in actuality, no one's going to use it. Or if they do use it, it's only for very specific things like time lapse or some short bursts or whatever it is. So I don't know. This to me is probably not worth getting all that excited for, because no matter what, it's probably going to be there's gonna be some strings attached. I'm sure, and that could be price. It could be asterisks that go with the these limitations of, or it could just be other things that aren't on the list that make it kind of irritating to use the camera. So, like, I don't see anything about flip screen. I assume it would have one, but hey, what do I know? They do really stupid stuff with flip screens all the time, and I don't understand it at all. Different. It's like they figured out the flip screen, and then every camera manufacturer has decided to do their own like weird spin on it, and they're all terrible. Just have it flip out normal, so you can vlog, you can view it from any angle. The one on the GH5 is great. Just use that for all the cameras. Sorry, that's a totally side note. But since I am doing this live, I figure I can respond to some of the people who something tells me it's all going to be cropped with a motion JPEG codec. Tyrone, you very well might be right. And that's probably, it'll be something like that. Some limitation of the codec being hobbled, the full frame camera not actually shooting full frame, and that's the other thing. People complain all the time about how the GH5 is micro four third and it's a crop camera and blah, blah, blah. And then they go buy a full frame camera that doesn't shoot full frame video, and somehow the GH5 is inferior because it's not full frame. Meanwhile, their full frame camera isn't actually full frame in video mode, that is. For photography, it's a totally separate thing, and I get it. So if your primary focus is photography and you just want video as an afterthought, that's fine. But I really do appreciate the path that Panasonic has taken, where they're truly making like a hybrid, where it's kind of like this does photo the best it can, and it does video the best it can. And to me, that's what you want. You don't want to look at something and buy it for one feature set and then have another parallel feature set where it's all kind of crippled. I would want them, if I'm going to buy a full frame camera for full frame photo and it can shoot video, I want full frame video as well. And then Ryan says, what's your opinion on the 1DX3? I feel like that camera checked a lot of boxes for video. To me, it's a sign they're finally going to push their video specs on their future hybrids. For me, the 1DX3 is the same problem with Canon that the 1DC was years ago, in that super heavy duty photography camera is not the form factor that I want for video. For video, I want a flip screen. I want it a little smaller. I don't want it super top heavy and weird. Like the GH cameras are like a nice in between, I would suppose. Like the best camera for video to me is the Ursa Mini. Now, it's not very mini. It's quite large, actually. I can't even imagine shooting with the regular Ursa. But the Ursa Mini is like a perfect like shoulder mount video camera that is small enough that you can hold it. Even like the Red cameras, like you see it on Instagram, you know, the kind of handheld mode where people like, it like looks cool to shoot with the Red handheld with the top handle or the side grip. But that kind of form factor where it's basically like a cube, a little bit like long in every direction. The 1DX where it's really tall but like narrow, to me doesn't seem all that attractive for video. And if it's got a mirror in it, I like mirrorless because you can adapt so many lenses to it. So the 1DX Mark III, also the codecs, I haven't actually used it and dug through all of them, but when they're saying 5.5K raw, you're going to have huge file sizes. And I think nowadays with codecs and compression, and like you look at even HBO, when they make this amazing epic Game of Thrones finale and they shoot it pristine, high quality, perfectly, with actors and everything, and then it gets compressed for streaming, and people are complaining about how they can't see anything because they're like TV's not calibrated right or whatever. Like displays and codecs and streaming and the digital nature of content has changed so much about just the way like acquisition, like from beginning to end, like every step in that process, like it always gets watered down, right? So even if you're shooting raw and you're capturing raw for a feature film where you want it for longevity and you want super high quality masters and it's premium and it's going to withstand the test of time, then yeah, absolutely spend the money, shoot raw. It's a Hollywood production, you have the budget for it. But for a YouTube video where it's probably a vlog or some kind of just camera review or something, all of that data on the front end hardly ever makes it to the final delivery format. And so you don't always have to start with like super massive files to make a good and quality product. There's plenty of videos out there where people are comparing the iPhone video to Red raw, and can you tell the difference on YouTube? That's been going on for almost 10 years now, where people are just able to capture, even on their smartphone, such high quality content, and then ultimately it gets compressed for the web and no one can tell the difference anyway. So that's not to say shoot on your iPhone, but it is to say don't focus on things like, oh, it's raw, and then you're worried about filling up hard drives where you need like 8 terabytes for one video. To me, that is completely inefficient. And you really have to gauge it based on the project. If the project warrants that much shooting and hard drive space, then fine, like make the investment. And you can calculate it like literally on a budget sheet. You say, well, the project it costs this much, so and we're delivering it in these. It's going to be on a movie screen, so we should capture it in raw or 8K whatever. But a lot of other projects would be totally fine 100 megabit 4K, and like no one's going to tell the difference. So even for like color grading, and people zoom in like 200%, look at the banding. You see banding all the time when you're watching Netflix shows. Like it's just the nature of digital content nowadays. And people, if you have the eye for it and you're looking for it, you will see it. But your general consumer is they don't know. They're looking at the actors, they're looking at the sets, they're looking at the story. They're not paying attention to banding in the corner or the compression artifacts on some light in the background. Like it's what we care about as professionals. We don't want our footage compromised, but at the end of the day, a lot of that stuff really doesn't matter. So the 1DX Mark III shooting 5.5K raw, it's cool. It's a neat feature if that's what you need, but I think that it's probably a feature many people don't need, and they would be totally fine if it's the same people that are totally fine shooting 1080p and that's all they need, then they don't need 5.5K raw either. So it really just comes down to the individual, comes down to the project, and just picking the right tool. And that's what's great nowadays is there are so many awesome tools for basically any price point. You can buy a used camera from just a few years ago and shoot beautiful 4K footage that was unheard of 10 years ago. So these kind of cameras, it's exciting to look, at a R5 spec list and say, oh, it's going to do 8K 30, but it's probably not. First of all, it's probably not going to actually do that. There's going to be a huge caveat there and say, well, yes, but it's only for a second or whatever. And then especially the 4K 120 and the 4K 60, why separate those two? If it can do 4K 120, why also say that it can do 4K 60? It would kind of be implied, wouldn't you think? Unless they're separate modes. One's cropped, maybe one's not. The EOS R does 4K 30, so to do 4K 60 wouldn't be a crazy leap. 4K 120 would be impressive, but if that's only for short bursts, if it's cropped, windowed sensor, that's going to affect how it stacks up against other cameras out there, where if the A7S Mark III or whatever Sony has up their sleeve, maybe it does full frame 4K 120 and this doesn't. We really only know once it's actually out there, but I would not be hyped for this camera. That's why I wanted to make this video, because I would not be too eager to say like, yes, Canon has redeemed themselves, they're saved. Even the very nature of that thought really shows how far behind Canon is in video when it comes to these things. And most people who you see out there shooting, the people I come across doing video production, filmmaking type stuff, people you see on YouTube who are shooting, to me, really, the only people I see using the Canon stuff are more of like the vlogger type people. The production people have all gone Blackmagic, Red, Sony, Panasonic. I hardly see that. I really don't see that many people shooting Canon. I mean, you will every once in a while for, I suppose, documentary stuff. But again, that's like cinema EOS cameras, the C500s and whatnot. I don't see a lot of people with like the Canon mirrorless. Definitely not like the Canon M mirrorless stuff, or even the RF stuff, or any other DSLR stuff. It seems pretty, like, I think Canon has kind of lost that market in a lot of ways by their own fault. It was their game to lose, and I think they made some decisions that really just turned people off. And now you see people excited for them to come back because people like Canon. People are excited about the color science, and they have Canon lenses, and they're just like the brand for whatever. And that's really why Canon, they are those like masters of marketing. They can put together a package that makes people excited when there's another company that does the exact same thing or even better. And you'll have this huge divide where people say like, the Canon stuff is great and that other stuff is garbage, when in reality it's almost flipped, or they're at least equal in some way. And I don't know, for me, I just like to pick the best tool for the job. That's really it. And what's going to be actually like the most useful on any given project, and what's going to help me do my job in a way that I couldn't do before. Because that's the thing, like, don't buy a new camera or get excited for a new camera if it doesn't offer you anything new that you can't already do with what you have. So if there's a game-changing feature that you absolutely need, then yeah, by all means invest in a new tool, because it's going to open up a whole new skill set potentially, or a new feature set that you can offer to your productions, your clients, whoever it is. But if it's not going to do anything new, then really sticking with what you have is fine, even if it's a couple years old. If it still gets the job done, no end viewer is ever really all that concerned with what something was shot with. That's really only on the production side that people care, like, oh, what'd you shoot that with? It's amazing. Meanwhile, they're asking the wrong question. It's not the camera. It's almost certainly not the camera. It's the 20 other things that are far more important than the camera when it comes to capturing content. It's the lighting, it's the set, it's the actors, it's the makeup, it's the wardrobe, it's everything. It's the editing, the color grading. You know, the camera is just one of the things. It'd be like, yeah, like what hammer did you use to build that house? It's like, I mean, I can tell you which hammer I used, but it's not like you could do the same thing if you just go buy that hammer at Home Depot. You need all the other things to really make it be complete and be the full package. So that's just my thoughts. Yeah, I don't know. Hopefully this came through nice and decent, you know, in the live setting. I know that's not. I don't know. We'll see. I could have recorded it and chopped it up and posted it, but I thought I just would talk casually for, I don't know, 30 minutes or so, whatever it's been. And then Ryan says, I know you're a big Panasonic fan. I heard their latest camera is Netflix approved. That's an exciting step forward for the prosumer. Yes, so the S1H, I believe all the S1 cameras are Netflix approved. The Panasonic stuff is great. And, you know, I wouldn't say that, you know, a GH5 is better than an A7S Mark II. They're just different tools for different jobs. The Sony stuff is better in some ways. I think the Panasonic stuff is better in other ways. For me, the GH5 and potentially, I haven't shot with the S1 cameras. Theoretically, I would assume it's similar, just with a larger sensor. Is that the Panasonic stuff is like this? The only way I can describe it is like the Swiss Army knife of video cameras, meaning it can do everything. It's got the scissors, it's got the screwdriver, it's got the corkscrew, it's got like everything you would ever need in any situation. You can shoot with the GH5, and whether, like, just for example, you might have a short film that you want to do and you could shoot that with the GH5, but then you might have a project where you're getting paid to go do corporate video and you need to record a 2-hour lecture. Most, you know, mirrorless hybrid DSLR type cameras, they have the recording limit, and like Panasonic hasn't had that for a while now. That might not be the case overseas, but at least in the United States it is. You can just record like you would on any other video camera, and you stop recording either when you run out of card space or you hit the stop record button. Most other mirrorless cameras have that 30-minute record limit, and so you might be able to shoot slightly, you know, oh, it's full frame, so you can do better with the short film, but then the moment you're put in this other situation where you have to do this other thing, a different job, now your tool is inefficient. And meaning you have to monitor the camera and hit record again, and then it's more to sync in post-production. You have more clips to deal with. It's just more junk and issues that make the job harder rather than making it easier. So for me, that's why the Panasonic stuff has always made sense, because they just have, it doesn't seem like they put those limitations into the camera as much, where the battery is like, there's no major problems with the battery of like, oh, the battery life is terrible. Like, no, the battery life is pretty good. Oh, you can build a time lapse right in the camera. You don't need some other app, or, you know, download some $5 thing, or, you know, hook it up to an intervalometer. No, it's like, no, the camera itself just makes the time lapse. It builds it right in camera. I'm actually doing one right now outside in my backyard. I'm doing a star time lapse, and it's like, it's all in the camera. Like, everything is right there. You don't need anything else. And that's what makes it so nice. And that's why I kind of call it the Swiss Army knife, where there are other cameras that are better. Like, I also shoot a lot with the Ursa Mini, the Ursa Mini Pro, which has, you know, even more, it's like that functionality, but even more so in the film and video space, with like the built-in NDs, built-in XLR, like everything about it is the perfect camera for any situation, where it's not maybe, and then maybe that's the wrong way to say it, because it's not like the best tool for one particular job. If any situation, you probably find like a better, more appropriate camera, but both the Ursa Mini and the GH5 pretty much work regardless of what situation you throw them into. You're not going to be like, oh, I can't do that. You're always going to have that answer. And you can always make it work too with other cameras as well. You know, oh, well, you buy the external battery, or you know, go hit record every once in a while, or, you know, the flip out screen on the Sonys has also been like a huge deal breaker for me, in that if I can't flip it around and view it from the front, that's really irritating for a lot of the work, or the situations I find myself using these cameras in. Same thing with the Ursa Mini. That screen doesn't flip around, and it's super irritating sometimes. So, yeah, I just think, pick the best tool for the job. And for me, that's been the GH5. And no one has ever looked at it and been like, oh, what'd you shoot that with? Like, they just look at it and they go, that looks good. That looks great. Oh, that's amazing. You do such amazing work. And it's just one of the tools. But I probably could have done it with a Sony. I could have done it with a Canon. I could have done it with a Nikon. Because it really doesn't matter. And that's the other point. Is like, it does not matter anymore. Most cameras are way better than you'll ever need in the situation. And it really comes down to the individual situation of like, what's the problem, and then how does the camera offer the solution to that. And I'm sure in the Canon case of the R5, what problem does 8K 30 frames per second solve? To me, that doesn't really solve a problem that a lot of people have. Most people are not needing more resolution like we were 10 years ago, and stuck with 720 and 1080 cameras, and looking and going like, wow, like if I could get 4K, like that would be such a game changer. And then, hey, now we all have 4K and it's just the norm, like everyone's got it. And then people say, well, you don't even need 4K, 1080 is fine. So what problem does 8K solve? If people are fine with 1080, I'm not me. Other people, say you only need 1080. So clearly they don't have a problem, so they must not need 8K either. So it's like, really like, what's the problem? How is this a solution? And 4K 120. Now theoretically, that's a problem like you might have, where like 60 isn't slow enough to capture whatever it is you're capturing. 60 frames a second is really nice to kind of give things an elegant gracefulness, but movement isn't super slow. At 120, it's much more noticeable, and that effect is exaggerated. And for certain things like pouring liquid, that looks a lot better at 120 than it is at 60. So I could totally see why that would be valuable, giving you 4K 120. But the fact that it's broken out makes me think that it's some kind of different mode, a burst mode, a crop mode, something of that nature. So we'll see. You think Arri will ever tap into the prosumer market? I don't think so. If they wanted to, I think they would have done that a long time ago with their lighting, with their cameras. I know Red, the Komodo, is supposed to be the kind of new Red, cheaper, more entry-level camera for Red. Me personally, I've shot with Red plenty of times, and while I haven't used a Red camera in probably 4 years, I haven't shot with a Red camera. But before that, they were great cameras. They're fine. A lot of times, though, like I was saying before, you don't need RAW. So a situation I find myself in often, and a lot of people are in this exact same situation, is they're recording interviews. A large majority of the content is driven by interviews. And so if you're recording an hour-long interview and you want it in 4K and you want it RAW, that's going to take up an enormous amount of disk space on your hard drive. And you're probably in the final product not even going to use the video all that much, because you're going to cover it with B-roll or graphics or something else, but you still want to capture it in video form. So depending on where the holes are or where the gaps are, or when you want to show the person, the interview subject on camera, you have that to cut to. So having that in RAW at like the super high res quality is a really inefficient way to shoot, because of what you're ultimately delivering. You're only giving a slice of it. And so, especially if you have multiple interviews for any kind of documentary or testimonial or anything like that, that's interview driven. Now, granted, it's not every situation, right? There you have short films, you have music videos, you have a bunch of stuff that's not that way. But there is a good amount of content that is. And I found it's like, you don't want to be capturing RAW in those situations. And with the Red cameras, that was the only feature. I think now, they have like the ProRes module, or like you can record to like an Atomos or something. But like in the camera, they've always been selling Red code RAW. Like, you want to shoot RAW, that's why you get a Red camera. But so what you can do is you can shoot like the super compressed RAW. And then in that situation, you're almost like negating the benefits of it. So like, why even do it? I don't know. I don't know why I started talking about Red when the question was about Arri. But anyway, Arri, I don't think will do it. I don't think they need to. They're their position in the industry, I think, is where it's at, and I don't think it's a name that many even like consumers even know. Like the people who go to Best Buy, the people have heard of Red cameras because they've done a good job attacking the market in that way and getting the name out there, and it looks cool. People shot on Red, oh, it's so cool. But Airy, like I don't see a lot of people even knowing what that is at that consumer, prosumer level. And I don't think they even need to. Red, on the other hand, with this Komodo, we'll see. What I was going to say, though, about the Red camera is that the interface was always super clunky and obnoxious to use. Like, just the menus, everything about using the camera was cumbersome and slow and irritating. And if a lot of what you're doing is kind of run and gun or you need to move quick, it can be very irritating. That's why the moment I used the Blackmagic Ursa Mini, I was like, I'm sold. This is the camera. Like, the menu alone is a reason to buy the Blackmagic stuff. So I just shot with the Pocket Cinema 4K for the first time, and it's the same menu system, the touchscreen menu. It's fantastic. Every camera manufacturer should look at Blackmagic in the menu because it's like an app. It's like it's like a smartphone. It's built the same way rather than the clunky menu interfaces of Sony, Canon, and Panasonic. They're all so irritating to dive through these menus, and there's layers and layers and layers, and things are on different pages, and you're constantly like shuffling through stuff to make tweaks to basic things like I want to change my resolution, I want to change my frame rate, I want to change my white balance. Like, no, that's a bad example. Like, you can do that around the camera, but you know what I mean. Like, changing anything can be irritating. Where on the Blackmagic, everything is its own setting. So they separate resolution from frame rate. A lot of camera manufacturers don't do that for whatever reason. They separate codec away from that. So you can pick like, okay, I want this codec with this resolution and this frame rate. And then you can change anything on the fly. And it's so easy to use. And it makes like run and gun cinema like a thing. You have a Super 35 sensor in the Ursa Mini, as well as on the Pocket Cinema 6K now. With the Ursa Mini, you have built-in NDs. You've got this amazing touchscreen interface. And now with the Ursa Mini Pro G2, you can do 4K 120 and 1080, like 300 frames a second. Like, it's incredible what they've built into that camera. The one thing I'll say against Blackmagic is the hardware. Like, their quality control isn't the greatest. Like, I've had hardware issues with the Ursa Mini, and I think a few other people have as well. But to their credit, anytime I've contacted them for repair, they've been more than helpful in terms of making the repairs and like getting it fixed. The only thing that's an issue with that is you have to lose the camera for it to go be repaired. Super inconvenient, but I guess it kind of is what it is. And for the price and the features of those cameras, like I can't think of anything more suited to shooting really high quality video, and or like, you know, if you want to do anything like remotely filmic, it's a no-brainer when it comes to price to performance. Like, those cameras are incredible, and they're just so much fun to use with just because of the menu system. And compared to like Red, which is like, it looks cool, like for an Instagram post, it looks really cool to have a Red camera, but when you actually use them, to me, like, and granted, I haven't used one recently, so it could all be updated, you know, how firmware and software is constantly changing. But to me, it's been, it was irritating. And what's funny with the Red stuff is, you know, when they first came out, I think I pre-ordered a Red one, and, you know, it was like game changing at the time because it was like film cameras made much more affordably. And for whatever reason, they captured the cinema market, and like that like they didn't want the low end people, right? They didn't want your people who like shooting with Sonys or, you know, GH5s or whatnot. Blackmagic has been super smart in going after that audience, because to me that is the pros, right? People say prosumer, but like the professional people, right, who are shooting, most of them that I see they're not, if they're shooting with a Red, it's because they're probably making a bunch of money off of YouTube and they can afford a Red, and so they spend money buying a Red, and because it's cool, but it doesn't make that big of a difference in their content. They could have done it with any camera. That's maybe a little bit jaded of a perspective, but there's truth there in that red. It's like bragging rights. It's like buying the Lamborghini. Like you didn't need it. You could get around with any car, and how far are you even driving? And you're never gonna go over 60 anyway. But you bought the Lamborghini just because you could. That's not quite a perfect analogy, but it's close. It's red for whatever reason has got that cool factor that people like. They think it's awesome, and it says something as a brand compared to other cameras. Like if you wear a Panasonic shirt, you're kind of a nerd. If you wear a red shirt, like, oh, you're cool. Why that's the case? It's all marketing. It's all fake. Like they're just cameras. It's just technology, but the branding of a company is really effective in terms of like who buys the clothes, who buys the cameras, and so I would say the Blackmagic stuff. It's not a super sexy company. You know, if you wear a Blackmagic shirt, that's really nerdy. But the Ursa Mini and the Pocket Cinema 4K and like all those cameras are just fantastic and great tools. You're not really missing out on anything that I can think of. By there's nothing that the more expensive cameras offer that you can't get with those cameras, at least at like 95% of content and like base level shooters. For people who are publishing digital content, it's going on YouTube. It's not if you want to shoot airy, go for it. If you want to shoot red, go for it, but don't feel the need to like gravitate towards these. Like just because they're more expensive doesn't mean they're actually going to give that value back to you as an individual, unless you're doing some kind of where you live in a market where those cameras are highly sought after, in like a rental environment where people are hiring shooters who come with cameras. Then you just have to you go where the market takes you and what people are looking for, and making sure you have the tools that people are looking for. But if you're just shooting content and you want to capture the best looking stuff, you can do it very, very affordably. You can do it with your smartphone. But I know people don't want to shoot on their smartphone. Of course not. I don't shoot on my smartphone like professional video. But you can totally do it with a GH5. You can do it with an Ursa Mini. You can do it with Pocket Cinema 4K. Like these cameras are affordable, but that doesn't mean that they're bad. And back to the R5, I think if this is anything, if this is actually true in any capacity of like where you would want like this list, if you read it and you go, okay, it does 8K 30, great, like no strings attached. If it actually does that, it's going to be incredibly expensive. It's not going to be expensive. All this stuff is going to be handicapped and crippled. So take that for what you will. I am not trying to do live streams every night. I'll do them every once in a while. If something comes up, I want to talk about this because it's people are talking about it, so I thought I'd throw my 2 cents in there. But I do have some more stuff planned, trying to reinvigorate the YouTube channel, getting back into it. As you can see, like it's been a while since I've been posting anything, and I actually have some really cool stuff lined up that is similar to what we've kind of been talking about right now, but in a more edited, condensed version. The Pocket Cinema 4K versus the GH5, talking about my thoughts on the Ursa Mini with some test footage, not test footage from like projects over the past year. What else? Stuff about B-roll. I have some videos coming that are going to be on the YouTube channel, but like I said, working doing video production each and every day for clients, like paid work. It's my job. So the YouTube stuff is all secondary in my spare time, in my free time. If you do want to support, I did set up a Subscribestar, basically like a Patreon, but I set this up just to help do more YouTube content. I want to use anything that's donated on Subscribestar to pop over to lens rentals. Because one thing I haven't got my hands on is the Panasonic S1H. I haven't had a reason to use it because, like I said, you can do most of the stuff you need with a GH5, with a Ursa Mini. I did need to rent a Pocket Cinema 4K to match. So the Ursa Minis needed like a third camera, so just rented the Pocket Cinema 4K to match the 2 Ursa Minis. But I would love to shoot with the S1H just because I think it's cool that Panasonic has a full frame mirrorless camera now. But I want to actually test it out and do proper like hands-on with it in like a not biased way where Panasonic is sending me a camera or anything like that. And like I want to pay for it. I want to get my hands on it, use it for something. probably use it for something more than just test footage. I don't know if like a project will come up where it makes sense, but I want to get my hands on it. But obviously that costs money, and the more expensive cameras, the more expensive they are to rent. So that's why I set up the Subscribe Star, so that if people like the content that's coming, that's going to start being on the channel along with the live streams, you can support that. And that's basically what I'll use it for. I don't need it because I have a job. It's not like I'm need the money just to fund myself. It's to fund the YouTube content and make the content a little bit more interesting, more regularly with stuff. So I did the Aperture 120D versus the 300D Mark II. 300D Mark II I bought because I needed it, because for a shoot came up, then I needed the extra power. But even back when I did the GH5 review, like that's when I rented from Lens Rentals, and then ended up buying the camera because I love the GH5. It's a great camera. So that's why I set up the Subscribe Star. You can subscribe. I think it's only like, I set it to like $5 a month or something like that. So it's really cheap. But that's what all that'll go to, is to play around with different cameras, test them out, see how they fare. I really want to shoot with the S1H, but it's like really expensive. I don't know what Panasonic was thinking when they decided the S1H was worth $4,000. Holy cow. I mean, it's a great camera on paper. Everything about it looks really nice. But $4,000 is steep, especially for a mount, the L mount that doesn't have, you're buying into a whole new system. So I don't know. I think if that came down, if this was like $3,000, it would be a lot more attractive, I think. But different conversation for a different day. If I end up shooting with it, I'll see how it feels. But that's that. Why do I get envious when someone has more megapixels than me? It's the nature of numbers. Everyone wants the numbers to get bigger. They want the numbers to get larger. It is what it is. I don't know. Human beings are just wired that way. Do you think pro cinema camera prices will eventually drop overall now that we're getting cameras like the Pocket 6K? No, I don't think so. They'll just keep offering more features, higher resolution, more frame rates, more stuff built in, probably, smarter packages, better sensors, better dynamic range. Like, they'll just keep getting better. And you mean cinema camera prices are lower now than they were, 15, 20 years ago. So that trajectory probably will continue to some extent, but at the same time, if you're looking for cheap cinema cameras, you can buy stuff used. Like, there's like original Alexas that are like $5,000, $6,000 or something like that. So even like an Epic, like a Red Epic, which is probably the first Red camera I shot with. I'm trying to think, with the Epic X. I don't even know what those would be. Let's see. What do you think, like on eBay? Yeah, let's see, 6,000. Here we go. Adorama. 6,000 for a Red Epic X Mysterium X 5K camera package with side SSD and EF mount. So $6,000, you get your Red Epic X, and I think, what would this have been new? Goodness, $30,000 is from memory is what I'm guessing. These were quite expensive when they were brand new, and now you can get them relatively cheap, all things considered. How much do they rent for? Like, can you rent a Red Epic from Lens Rentals? Yeah, the Dragon. So that's the thing with Red, is they made it really confusing, where they've got the Epic W, the Epic X, they've got the Dragon, they've got the Helium. Like, it's really, really hard to track and understand what Red camera you're even shooting with, because different rental houses, like, they all have Red. That was the smart thing with Red. They branded it as Red, and so everyone wants a Red camera, but they're very different and they change all the time. And there's the Red Raven, the Red Ranger, the Red Dragon, the Helium, the Gemini. I don't know what all of these things even mean anymore because I stopped caring about red after shooting with it for a few times and being like, this is kind of irritating. This is kind of annoying. And then I shot with the Ursa Mini and I was like, this is the camera I want to use all the time because it's so much fun to shoot with. It does everything you need and it's a joy. It's a joy to work with. And it's way cheaper. So you don't need the red. I don't know what they're doing the Komodo thing. That's their next in line. You can read all about the Komodo. But it's like it's like every red camera. It's coming, and then it comes out, and then they have a new thing coming. It's coming, and the next thing it's coming. It's something. Let's see. Is there any cameras out in the market that has AI resolution enhancement built in? Are you talking about? Is it like what is that photo editing software? Is it Topaz? I see it all the time on 4.3 rumors. They're always talking about Topaz. I think that's what it is. But no, I don't believe there's any kind of AI enhancing cameras like built in. There was it one of the Olympus cameras did the kind of photo stacking for resolution where it would use the stabilization system to kind of shift the sensor ever so slightly, so you'd kind of like maximum resolution by doing like resolution stacking in the camera. But even that's not like a very common thing in a lot of cameras. You can do it if you want in Photoshop, in the computer after the fact. But I don't know of any AI enhanced cameras. But that's probably the next thing on the list. The machine learning type stuff, the AI built right in that's going to take the picture for you and make it amazing and save your highlights and make sure your shadows aren't clipped and all that stuff. But again, it's just like if it does something that you can't do on your own, then yeah, great, get it. But if you don't need it, then don't get it. It's as simple as that. So EOS, I can't say EOS. I've said it this whole stream, I'm pretty sure. EOS. I like to say EOS. I've always said EOS. The EOS 5D. EOS. At this point, they should just get rid of it, though. Just the Canon R5. Why does it got to be the EOS? EOS. Isn't all the Canon stuff EOS at this point? There's Cinema EOS, regular EOS. Just drop it. Just Canon R5. Is there some other EOS, not an EOS R5, like an R5 that's not EOS from Canon? I don't think so. It's silly, all these names. That's why I can't follow any of the Fuji stuff, because their names are just mind-boggling. X is in everything. It's an X this, an X that, an X this. XT, and then they've got like the 3000 or the 3, and I don't know. It's so hard to follow. Even the Panasonic stuff, it's like GH5, and then they got the 5S, and then they got the 1, the S1, the S1R, the S1H, and that's just for the one model. Like, you've got to keep all this stuff straight. I really wish across the board the whole industry would just streamline and just figure their stuff out and make it easy. I think they would honestly sell more cameras if they made it easier to understand what you were even buying. Like the Canon T8i, but it's also like the Rebel something or another, in different regions. It's so convoluted. Give it a name. Call it, like, I don't know, even the iPhone is like pretty good about it, but even that's really irritating how there's no iPhone 9, iPhone 8, iPhone X. Oh, X like iPhone 10? No, iPhone X. Oh, so it's not the 10. No, it's the iPhone X. Okay. And now they have the iPhone 11. So it was the 10. No, it was the X. Okay, it was the 10 though? Yeah, it was the 10. But no 9. No 9. What are they actually on? Who even knows? Give it the year it came out. That's what they do for computers, right? That's how you track it. But even that's really annoying. Fall 2016. What decade is your MacBook from? Which month? What is it, a Sagittarius MacBook? Oh no, you've got the Cancer, the Capricorn MacBook. God. You'd think there'd be one simple, easy way to do it. I think just give it the year it came out and like the name. Like give it a name if it's like the red Komodo, Red Komodo 2020, and then the Red Komodo 2021 has the upgrades, and then the Red Komodo 2022 is, something different. It should be a lot easier than it is. They think that they're getting us to. Is the thought that if they make it more confusing, they'll sell more cameras? Because I don't think that's true. If I don't know what a camera is, if it's too confusing to even know what the name is, like, I'm out. I don't even want to consider it. Oh, it's got some crazy name. No, thank you. I don't. Oh, it does what? No, I'm good. Don't tell me about it. I don't want to know. Future will be awesome. Yes, the future will be awesome. I'm always excited for the future. I definitely prefer the future over the past because I do not want to go back to the cameras from 10 years ago. Maybe there's some marketing research behind the different letter combinations and people just buy it because it has these names. That could be, but I honestly don't think people. I think the names are just like for a product catalog and people actually hate them. They must be for a spreadsheet somewhere or a product catalog or like that old, like, just give it a bunch of letters and numbers. Oh no. YouTube is not receiving enough video to maintain smooth streaming. Uh-oh. Are they kicking me off? The stream might be over, everyone. Just as we were just getting started. I'm wired. My connection is wired. Let me know. Please let me know in the chat how the stream is, because if it's garbage, I'll just stop it. When will the market crash? Oh, on cameras? I don't know. The Libra MacBook. That's right. That's right. Mine's a Sagittarius. I only buy the MacBooks with the same sign as myself. As long as you can see and hear me, let me know. But if for some reason the stream craps out, freak out in the chat and just let me know. At this point, we're long past the Canon EOS R5. Long gone. What do you want to talk about? We'll talk about anything. When will the market crash? I don't think the market will crash. I think it just keeps changing. I think there's certain companies that will go out of business or they'll change. Like we saw that already with Samsung and the NX1. They've made this amazing camera that apparently not enough people bought. And so they say, all right, we're not going to do that anymore, which is unfortunate because the NX1 was an awesome camera. And I'm sure that it would have been beneficial for the market to have more cameras like that from a manufacturer like Samsung. But, business reasons, like it's not sustainable. It's not sustainable. So I think there will be those kinds of shifts. If Canon wasn't doing like what they're doing now with the R line, like they did the M cameras, but that was... I don't really know anyone who was excited about the Canon M cameras, but now these R cameras have, I think, a lot more potential with these RF lenses. It seems like they actually have a solid plan now for making what people want to buy these days. Most people, I think, want mirrorless. It's very rare that I see anyone, really wanting a mirror box in their camera. Like, why would you at this point? So the mirrorless stuff makes a lot of sense, and it's good to see Nikon and Canon going that route. Obviously, they're playing a little bit of catch-up, but you still have people who are diehard, Nikon and Canon shooters. They've been doing it that way forever, so they have that kind of that padding, that cushion that Panasonic and Sony don't have, where they just have to be a lot more aggressive. And like Sony has been killing it. I think Panasonic has been doing an okay job, but they're. I made a video years ago about, the GH5, being bigger than Micro Four Thirds or something like that. And there's a fraction of people like Micro Four Thirds and they think it's perfect for whatever reason. Like they really, really like it. But I think the vast majority of people would much rather have full frame. And that's why I think Sony has done so much better in that space, is because people want the full frame. Not that you need it or that you have to have it or that it makes all that big of a difference, but just as on paper, when you're looking at specs and when you compare cameras, people want to know, is it full frame? Is it full frame? Is it full frame? And for Panasonic to not have had a full frame camera until just now with the S1, was a huge disadvantage, I think, for them, where they sold for sure for that micro four thirds audience, the people that were fine with the smaller sensor, but not having a full frame option was kind of brutal. People say, you know, micro four thirds, oh, the sensor's smaller, the lenses can be smaller, everything can be smaller. Like, that's great, but you're still not putting these cameras in your pocket. People have their smartphones in their pocket. I have a pancake lens for my GH5. It's the 20 millimeter lens, 1.7. It's a cool, fun little lens, but I can't fit it in my pocket. Like, that's not, so I don't, at a certain point, I don't really care how small the camera is, because I just, like, I'm going to have to bring it along in addition to my smartphone anyway. So when you're looking at, okay, my smartphone can do these things. If I want a digital camera, I want it to be full frame. I want it to have a, you know, a fast lens. It can be a big lens, interchangeable, you know, etc. So I think that's just why Sony has done so well, is because they were the ones that had that, like, everything that people wanted: mirrorless, full frame, features for video and photo that people want. I mean, their autofocus and like eye tracking and all that stuff is fantastic. So it's no surprise. It's like people look at it and go, you know, if you were ever to wonder, you know, like, well, how did Sony do it? How did they get so popular? Why do so many people like the Sony cameras? It's like, just look at them. Like, they're obviously good cameras and they do basically what everyone wants, and no one else is offering. Like, they have no competition. At least they haven't until now with the Canon stuff. Canon finally going mirrorless, having a full frame mirrorless option with the R. It's like, that's like the first time Sony had any decent competition from anybody. So they were just able to, like, just haul in so many new customers because no one was putting out there what people actually wanted. Now, they could be better, Sony could be better on the video side of things, but a lot of people that are buying a camera like that, you know, they're doing for photography. So, and the video is secondary. For me, I went with the GH because it's, you know, the micro four thirds is using the speed booster to get to super 35 is a compromise I'm willing to make. But it's the question everyone says, you know, it's like, oh, you want GH5? Like, oh, well, it's not full frame like the Sony. It's like, okay, all right, yeah, sure. So yeah, Panasonic would have been a lot smarter if they'd gone full frame earlier. They would have a lot more lenses now. Like, they should have done it sooner, but they didn't. Do you know any free good software that can stitch pictures together to make a gigapixel humongous photo? I don't know of any free good software. That is a tricky question because free software is not, well, everything's free until they charge you the subscription, you know, or per month or whatever it is. But no, I don't know of anything off the top of my head. When will resolution no longer be a selling point? I think resolution always will be a selling point, just like megapixels have always been a selling point, even though people have been complaining about that forever too. Like, you only need 12 megapixels. Why do you need more than 12 megapixels? Like, it's a number. The bigger the number, the more people like it. If you make a 100 megapixel camera, if you make a 200 megapixel camera, a 500 megapixel camera, like, it's always going to get more and more and more people excited about it because people like the numbers to be bigger. I only have 14.2 megapixels. How many do you have? Yeah, well, it's the nature of it. I've got 12 stops of dynamic range. I've got 13 stops. I've got 14 plus stops of dynamic range. I can shoot, you know, 6400 ISO. I could shoot 12,800 ISO. Like, it's just the numbers get bigger and people freak out and they get more excited. It's just the nature of it. Use what's actually practically beneficial and useful to you, and don't worry about the numbers or what other people are doing or what the camera name is or any of that stuff. Use what works for you and gets the job done, and not just the one job, but like any job, you know. Plan for the future, invest in something that's going to be beneficial, and don't worry about what other people are shooting with, because it honestly doesn't matter this day and age. It really doesn't. Almost any camera out there is going to do a great job. And it all gets compressed on YouTube. That's right. Everything gets compressed on YouTube. It's the nature of it. So I'll leave it there. I'll wrap things up. R5. Don't get too excited. I think all these things are going to be crippled. And this was, you know, a live stream. We might do more of these if people like them. If not, check out the channel because I will have more proper, edited video content coming. Stuff that I'm like spending time on. That's what I want to. That's my plan for this year is 2020. The free time that I have to spend on YouTube, spend it making more produced intentional content. Some of my older stuff I would do more like this, where just chatting. So I figure I'm gonna break it up. Like if it's a live stream, it'll be more conversational, just talking about stuff. And then if it's posted video, it'll be more edited and produced. It'll have music, it'll have B-roll and all that good stuff. And then if you do want to help support stuff purely in like renting cameras, renting lights, testing things out, you can check out Subscribestar. And yeah, hopefully next thing on my list will be the S1H. I want to get my hands on it, see how it compares to the GH5, because I really like the idea of having basically a full frame GH5. I like that a lot, but it's expensive, so I'm not just gonna spend $4,000 on a camera I don't actually need, because I have all the cameras I actually need. So thank you for hanging out, talking about the R5. The latest video looked great, good stuff. Thank you, Ryan, appreciate it. Hopefully stuff can even get even better. That's my goal. Just keep doing better and better stuff that's valuable information. I want to put stuff out there that's unbiased, easy to understand. If I'm like testing a light, I want to like test the actual intensity of the light, show the color charts, show real production, that type of stuff, not just test footage from like my backyard. I want to do like real production, show the tools actually being used in an environment that creates something outside of like, this is just a review video. Was that the GH5? Yeah, on the aperture one, that was all GH5 footage, and basically everything I've been shooting recently for the YouTube channel. All the videos I have shot that I still need to edit, because that's the time-consuming part, is the editing. Basically all of it's GH5, aside from the Pocket Cinema 4K comparison to the GH5. Obviously that has some stuff that was shot with the Pocket Cinema 4K, and then the Ursa Mini kind of not really a review, but like I did when I first got the Ursa Mini, it was kind of doing like hands-on first impressions, doing an initial review, and then I got a video that I've shot that I'm putting together that's kind of how it's all worked over the past 3 or so years with that camera, what my thoughts are now. If you watch this stream, obviously a majority of those thoughts, but putting that with some footage and cutting that together. And thanks for this awesome stream. Well, thank you. I appreciate it. I enjoy doing this kind of stuff. I like talking about cameras. I like talking about video, photography, all that stuff. There's a lot of good information out there, but there's also a lot of just, I guess, the nature of the news and like just the way rumors are and hype and people get all excited. And I think people end up spending more time looking at, spec sheets when they should just be probably taking photos or shooting video, or just worried about like what's in their camera bag. There's nothing for me on this list that's like, oh, I like 4K 120, like, yeah, that'd be cool for sure, but I can already do 120. It's granted it's 1080 on the GH5, but I can already do 120 frames a second. So unless I need the 4K, that's not really a selling point over anything I already have. And then the 8K, it's like, we'll see, but I don't have a need for resolution at this point. If it comes as part of a camera, that's a reasonable price, then great, but it's not anything I need at this point. Thanks for the likes. Always, it's always good YouTube etiquette, right? You gotta like, comment, subscribe, share the video, blah, 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 all that good stuff. You all know the drill. I guess I can say it, but thank you though. I appreciate it. Anyone who's here, yeah, let me know what you want to see. I guess that's a good thing. Like I have my ideas of this would be a cool video, or this would be an interesting topic to talk about. But if there's something specific you want to see, tested, or based on the equipment I have, like I'm more than happy to put together a video too, if it's like something that makes sense. So I shoot with the GH5, Ursa Mini, aperture lights. What else? I don't know. Yeah, just let me know what you guys want to see. I'm just kind of still just throwing stuff out there because I'm going to hit end the stream, but I don't want to hit end the stream if I'm in the middle of something important. So this is all just fluff filler to end it. Canon EOS R5, expectations versus reality. Guess we're going to find out sooner rather than later. Don't get too hyped. It's Canon. You know how they are. They're gonna have a camera, and it's gonna be a camera that people like. But I don't think it's gonna be all this, this stuff. People are getting a little too excited. All right, now I'm gonna hit the button. We'll see what happens.